Hi, it's Penny here, and in this video I'm going to be continuing my project where I am trying to read the first chapter, or maybe two, of every series that I am interested in reading, mostly fantasy and sci-fi. Actually, probably all fantasy and sci-fi because that's who I am. So in this video I'm going to be focusing on the group that I made that is all books that were recommended to me by people I trust. I've actually split this into two groups. This video I'm going to focus on ones where I was recommended these books by other booktubers, and then later on I'll do another video of books that were recommended to me in video comments or other places. But I watch a lot of booktube, so there are a lot of books in this category still, so we should get into it. I basically have 10 book series I want to try in this video. I did manage to get 5 of them from the library. The other 5 I will have to do as online samples, and I am still really looking for series that I can read via audiobook. So for all of these I'll be doing the thing where I use the Audible sample of like 5 minutes, listen to that first, and then continue to the next chapter ending, or maybe after that, depending on the book. We'll see how much I read to feel like I've gotten a taste of it to decide how I feel about it. I do already have 7 books, I think, from my last video where I prioritized them into an order. And so these new 10 I want to try and fit into that priority order. I'm feeling like we're already getting a lot of book series I want to try. So I'm thinking of like having a priority list of priorities. Am I making things too complicated? Probably. Anyway, let's get into trying the books. I'm just going to start with this pile from like the one at the top to the bottom, and then we'll do the digital ones. So firstly, I have The Outside by Ada Hoffman. This one is one that Rachel from Shades of Orange recommended in a video of hers, and I don't remember much about it, but I think it's a sci-fi to do with super intelligent AI gods, it says. And I will be honest, when I got this from the library, I read the first little section. Like at the start there's a kind of a little block of italicized text, and I read it and I loved it. It's kind of like instructions for a recipe of how to build AI. Like, it's such a mix of science and poetry, and I can tell that the next bit is not going to be the same as this little block, but based on this block I can't see this not getting a high priority. So I guess I'll go away and read this, and then I'll let you know whether it's lived up to my now very high expectations. So, as expected, I absolutely loved this. I mean, I will admit, it's that first little snippet that is just like, I feel like I could read it every day and just get so much joy from it. I just love the combination of like science and religion and philosophy. But I also get the feeling that's going to continue. So we're mainly following this autistic woman who's been a very big part of this new reactor experiment that the humans are doing. And she's very worried that there's something wrong with it. The AI computer gods of this world are very interested in this, because it's something like when a human dies, the computers will like eat their soul, which is more like absorbing all their knowledge and experiences into themselves. And so the better the humans, the computer gods are absorbing, the better they will be. Although different ones of these computer AI gods focus on acquiring different kinds of humans. So anyway, it's in the best interest of these computer gods for humans to be doing great things. So they're very supportive of this reactor experiment that the humans are doing, even though humans are also limited in the technology they're allowed to use, because I guess the computer gods want to keep control of them. But I just love that combination of science and religion, and the way that it's done is so interesting. Also, so not much happened in some ways, other than an introduction to the world. We did this reactor experiment. It does say on the back that something goes wrong, but in the first chapter nothing went wrong, and now I'm suspicious because both the back of the book and also this little bit at the beginning make me think we're going to be messing with reality, and that you're not even going to be able to trust everything you read. Anyway, the summary is I am so hyped to read this. I actually think I decided for my priority list we're going to put all the 7 books I have from the last time here, and then I've got 10 books to try in this video, so we'll have 17 slots, which I'll somehow make pretty here. But this one is jumping right to the top. It is the book that I am the most excited from this project so far. Like, I can't wait to read this. Anyway, I'm actually really sad that I have to put that aside, but I have way too many other things to pick this up right now. But oof, it's kind of nice to have a book that you're really excited about, that you're not reading yet, but you can just have it there, like knowing that it's waiting for you. Anyway, my stack is back here. So the next book we're going to pick up is The Art of Prophecy. So this is from the War Arts saga. This art looks like the art from the front of Yumi and the Nightmare Painter, a little bit at least. Anyway, all I know about this one is I think it's where there is a prophecy of this chosen one, and they're trying to train this chosen one up, but maybe he's not everything they would have hoped for. And then I think the prophecy happens and it turns out it was wrong and he was nothing to do with it. And so now what are you going to do, Mr. Chosen One? I've heard a lot of really good things, so I'm hoping I'll love it. Oh, actually, I always forget to say, I did try the audiobook for The Outside, and actually, I think the audiobook was fine, but this is just the kind of book where I feel like you wanna sit with it, and like some of the ideas you want to take the time to absorb it, and then when you're reading via audiobook, you can't really do that because the audiobook just keeps moving on. So even though the audiobook was probably okay, I think for me, this is the kind of story I would want to read physically. Okay, so I actually read the first 2 chapters of The Art of Prophecy. I did find out the artist for this cover is the same as that traditionally published Yumi and the Nightmare Painter cover, so I was right. Also, I realized I didn't say what booktuber had recommended this, and to be honest, I think I'd seen quite a few recommend it, but the person I saw recommend it most recently was JD Ray Reads. I think she was reading the second book and maybe not loving it, which isn't promising, but I know she really loved this first book. So from the first 2 chapters, basically the first chapter we follow this woman who's obviously a very accomplished soldier, but she's also missing an arm, which I guess has kind of ruined her soldiering career, even though she still seems to be very capable. And there is this prophecy that this boy is going to save the kingdom or something, and she's gone along. She's been asked to go along by the king, the duke, somebody has asked her to go and check out how this child of the prophecy, how his training is going, because he's a very important person. But it turns out that the way he's being trained is incredibly ineffective. They are training him, but they're also like never letting him be injured and never letting him ever go without anything. And so he's not really learning everything he needs to learn, and he doesn't really have a sense of reality. And in a lot of ways, he's a spoiled little shit, but she does also kind of see some promise in him. So basically, she comes in and says, I'm going to take over his training at the end of chapter 2, even though he's not very keen for that. Also, she seems to have some kind of like wind-based magic because she's able to like send her voice off into people's ears and also like pull their voices from a distance to her so that she can hear them. And also at some point she seemed to like kind of fly. Anyway, I did really like the tone of the writing. I felt really sucked into it straight away. So I think this is going to go very high on the priority. I'm having a little bit of a battle though between this and Foundry Side. So it's definitely not as good as The Outside. The concepts in this just blew me away. I still cannot wait to read this. But either this or Foundry Side go second. They're probably pretty neck and neck, but I think because I've been interested in reading Foundry Side for longer, it's not a good reason, but I think I'm going to put it higher for that. Also, I think the magical concepts of Foundry Side seemed more my taste. This, I'm a little bit worried that it's going to be a lot of like battle training, which probably isn't my taste, but I really like the writing style, and I think the world is going to be very interesting. So this is going to be now 3rd on the priority. So then, next we have this massive chunker. So the first binding by Virdi. I actually don't really remember much about this other than Patrick Leo recommended it, and he said something that made me think, oh, I want to read it, but I don't really remember what it is. Sometimes I hate my bad memory, and then other times I'm really happy because I can go into things blind. Because I'll read this first chapter, and by the time I get to the book, I'll probably have forgotten what it was about. Hopefully. Anyway, I'll read the first chapter of this and then I'll let you know what we think. So I read the first chapter of the first binding and I liked it, but I remember now what Patrick Leo must have said about this is that it's a lot like Name of the Wind, which I did really like. Am I frustrated about the lack of the third book? Yes. And actually that makes me a little bit worried about this because I can see that the series is not finished, and writing a series of really long books like this, like, it's a challenge, it's a commitment that not all authors are up to. So I can see that maybe this would give you what you're wanting from a Name of the Wind continuation. However, you might still end up waiting for this one as well. So basically, the very beginning is very like Name of the Wind, in that we start by talking about different kinds of silences. And basically it's this storyteller who has arrived at this bar, and he's doing everything very theatrically, and you're inside his head so you can see like how he's thinking through every single action and the way that it's going to have an impact on people, so that then they'll go away, bring back a bunch of people to listen to his stories. And I did really like that bit. Then we had this weird bit where he's kind of drawing this story out of the barkeeper. That the barkeeper's story is not that interesting, but at the same time, the storyteller is like polishing the bar and like somehow splitting his mind, and like he talks about folding his mind, and it seems like through that he's able to like focus down his vision of how things should be and make it become true, which does remind me in Name of the Wind, Quoth kind of does the same thing where he splits his mind into multiple parts in order to like have each part of his mind focus on things. But it's also similar in that there seems to be like a lot of legends about the storyteller. They're all like, oh, was he the storyteller? And there's bits throughout this first chapter where he mentions like things that people think he's done that are really epic. Or like the barkeeper, I think, says, is it true that you did blah? And he's like, yes, it is true. And he's always like very factual about, yes, that is true. So I'm interested to see, like, is it true, or is it more like in Name of the Wind where it's not exactly true, it's true but not true, if you know what I mean? Like, it's true, but the story of it sounds much more impressive than the reality. Anyway, then there also was a bit right at the end where he pulled out his I've actually forgotten now. Was it a mandolin? A mandolin. And it's like, I'm not really clear exactly what it's telling me, but it's something to do with there being 10 bindings, and this mandolin is broken in a strange way to do with those 10 bindings. And this book is called The First Binding. So I guess that's going to become a lot clearer and be very important to the story. Anyway, also, I did listen to the audiobook, and I do think, even though I'm worried about the fact that this series isn't finished, and I'm also worried about how thick this is, I do think the audiobook is one that I could really enjoy. It's quite slow, but that's what suits the tone of the book. But while being slow, it still kind of really draws you in. And I found actually that the audiobook was easier to focus on than reading it physically. Maybe it's something to do with the lyrical nature of the words. Anyway, I'm going to put this one on my audiobook list, which is still quite sparse. But also, if I'm prioritizing it like against the ones that I have here physically, I still think I didn't quite enjoy it as much as The Art of Prophecy. Like, it's still really well written, but The Art of Prophecy is like a little bit more of a fun writing style, and just kind of, I guess they both wrap you up in it and get you involved, but it's probably just that slowness of the first binding that didn't quite make me as excited to read it. So that's the ordering in here. And looking at my bigger priority list, I also think the ordering's still kind of the same. The first binding will be after The Art of Prophecy and before One Dark Window, because One Dark Window I'm still very concerned is going to turn out to be too much fantasy romance for me. Anyway, so then the next book that I have is The Final Strife. This is not the cover that I see most people talking about. This is. And also, I don't know what it was about this one that it interested me. I just know that Joshana mentioned this, and then also I think recently I saw Becca in the books mention it, and both of them said that it was really great. I'm sure they also said some details that made me interested. Those have gone right out of my brain. From the back, it looks like maybe there's some kind of trials or competition type thing. Anyway, I'll read the first chapter and let you know what we think. Okay, so the first one of this one, what I've remembered is that this is about this world where there are people with different coloured blood. And the people with red blood can use the magic of this world or do some kind of blood work, and they're called the Embers. There's also the Dusters, who have blue blood, and they're very oppressed and like forced into servitude. And then as well as the Ghostings, and they have transparent blood, which sounds really interesting, but they're treated the worst. They have on their second moon cycle, they have their tongues split and they have their hands chopped off, which is awful. And we're mainly following this young woman who is a duster but really thinks that she will be able to use this blood magic. But she's also a drug addict, alcoholic, maybe kind of delusional, I don't know. Also, though, from the prologue, so the prologue was just the storyteller telling a story about this duster rebel who went in and basically swapped a duster baby for an ember baby. So now perhaps there are duster babies living in the Ember Society and vice versa. I'm suspicious if our main character is actually an ember living in Duster Society. Oh, there's 12 babies that are meant to have been swapped. I will say, for the audiobook, so the audiobook really only covered like a little bit of the prologue, and the prologue is quite a different narrative style than the main story, like the bits where we're following, I think her name's Saara. Yeah, the prologue was very different, and so then from the short sample that you get on Audible, I can't really tell whether I would like this via audiobook, because like there's a lot of world building in that prologue, and that was quite overwhelming, and I know that would be even more difficult in audiobook, or maybe I read it via audiobook or half of it via audiobook, so like it was probably harder because of that, but I don't think that difficulty would continue on through the rest of the book. But I didn't get any of the audiobook samples, so I'm not willing to take the risk. So probably I would have to read this one physically. It does seem like an interesting world, and I am interested to learn like what's happened with these babies that have been swapped and are now presumably some kind of adults. But also we haven't really learned much about the magic, so I think this is getting a little bit repetitive, but once again I think I would put this still in the order that I've read these. So Final Strife would be less interesting to me, or is one I'm not prioritizing as much as the first binding. I haven't actually thought yet where I would put this in the bigger priority. Let me just have a look down here. Okay, so I think I'm still going to put the Final Strife above One Dark Window, not just because I'm worried about One Dark Window's romantic elements, but also like the main character in the Final Strife just seems much more vibrant and real and grittier, and I'm more interested to see what she's going to do. I felt like the main character in One Dark Window was a little bit of a pushover, which perhaps was going to change, but I still think the Final Strife might be more of an interesting character arc. So that's the order that we're going to go with. Then the next book. So this is written and read by Anne Bishop. I think, again, this is one where I always see a different cover. And also, once again, I don't really know. I think there's like some kind of courtyard where the others reside, which is like people with some kind of different magical abilities. And because this girl is on the run, she's had to go to this courtyard, which is kind of the only place she can be safe, even though generally it's considered to be a really dangerous place. This is an older book, I believe, 2013, so I think it's older than all the other books I've read so far, and I don't really know what to expect. And I also, who was it I saw talking about this one? Oh, it was Reagan from Peru's Project. So I know she really liked it. Hopefully I'll at least like the first chapter. So I have read the first chapter of Written and Read, and I want to say that I feel like I can tell it has an older writing style, but also part of me is just thinking maybe it has a writing style, or like it's dealing with the kind of characters that books I read back in that time did. Like, I don't necessarily think that there aren't modern books doing the same thing as this, though. Just that I don't tend to read those books anymore, because I really get the feel from this that it's going to be some kind of a romantasy, hopefully with enough fantasy for me to still feel that it's solid, because I'm just not a romance reader. Sometimes I don't mind it on the side, but it has to really be on the side. There does seem to be enough of a fantasy story in this. So we've got this young girl who's being chased by some people. It seems as well like she's part of a prophecy, and maybe she's the one who saw the prophecy. And as well, this is in a world where humans used to be really isolated, and then when they went out exploring the rest of the world, they came across these, they're called the others, but they seem to be some kind of shapeshifter type creatures, like different animal shapeshifters that really like to eat humans. So when the humans went out, they kept coming up against the others who would just eat them whenever they did something that the others didn't approve of. So the others are very dangerous, but this girl still thinks that going to the area where the others live in this city, she thinks going there is safer than the people who are after her. And in these areas, like within the human cities, there's sometimes these areas that the others control where they liaise with humans and like trade for goods. So she's gone there for safety and ran into this guy that seems to be some kind of wolf shapeshifter, and it also seems like maybe he's something to do with the prophecy, and she's going to now work for him, possibly kind of in his bookshop that has like a little coffee shop next to it. That part almost felt a little bit cozy fantasy, but the chapter did end with some humans being eaten. So that's definitely not the cozy feel that you might think you're getting. So there is some elements of this that I was interested in, particularly the humans being eaten. I will say one thing that frustrated me. So the audiobook wasn't too bad, especially for a book like this where I don't think I'd get too much more out of reading it physically. But the audiobook sample was really too short, so I didn't get any of the bits with the guy's perspective. I don't know, is it going to be a different narrator? I would hope so, but maybe not. Can I see who the narrators are? It does seem to just have one narrator listed, which is not the best. So I wanted to say that I could read this by audiobook, but I really wish I had gotten to listen to that last bit where some humans are being eaten, because I really think that that would tell me whether this book is going to work for me as an audiobook or not. But anyway, in terms of priority, keeping with the way the rest of this video has gone, pretty much the priority of these books is in the order that I read them. But I do think actually I'm going to put Written in Red even lower on the overall priority. So I'm probably going to put it after A Master of Jinn, just because like I was intrigued more than I was for Bonesmith, but I still feel like A Master of Jinn seemed a little bit more unique, which maybe isn't fair because maybe at the time Written in Red was doing things, I don't know, I suspect not really. It just seems kind of like a typical Chosen One prophecy fantasy with some shapeshifters. But anyway, that's where I'm going to put it in the overall priority. Next, what I'm going to pick up is Spinner by Michael J. Bowles, I think. So now we're on to the digital ones that I don't have physically to read. So this one is about a boy in a wheelchair, and I think he has some friends that also have disabilities, and there's some kind of evil forces after them for some kind of abilities that he has. I did see that it's listed not only as YA, which I am trying to avoid YA to some point, and just because it hasn't been doing it for me most of the time lately because I'm getting too old for it. Also, it's kind of like a superhero type story, which I wasn't sure about. However, I am interested in the disability rep, and also it's listed as YA horror. And generally, I actually tend to like YA horror better than other YA, and maybe better than adult horror. Maybe I'm just not widely read enough in horror, and that's where I need to start. Anyway, this one was one that was recommended, or that I saw Kaz from Cats with Camera really liking, so we will see what we think about it. So I read the first chapter of Spinner. One thing to note is there is not an audiobook for this as far as I could tell. The other thing is I'm not really sure about this, just again because of the target age. I feel like the story feels a little bit young for me, and I'm not sure because of that if I'm going to enjoy it. Like, we're following this boy, and he is in a wheelchair, and he's with this foster family, and it's quite clear the foster mother is trying to like sell him off or something because of his abilities, and is like manipulating him to use his abilities in front of these people. And her whole motivation just seems a little bit like evil adult rather than a real motivation, which I don't really like. But that said, his ability is more interesting than you might think. So because it's called Spinner, I kind of assumed, I don't know, that it would have something to do with his wheelchair. But it seems more like he's able to spin tales, or like somehow change reality, or change the way that people think about things. He talks sometimes about spinning people, and then it sounds like they've forgotten something that actually happened. And then there's another time where his like foster brother has a black eye, and he like spins him to like remove the black eye. So even though I did find the writing style a little bit simplistic and just that teen feel isn't my favorite, I do think if I'm putting this in priority order that I might actually still put it above Written in Red, just because I think the concepts sound like more interesting and unique. And even though I'm complaining about the writing style being simplistic, at least it would be quick to get through. If I am considering Spinner in the bigger priority though, I still would say I'm not more excited about that than A Master of Jinn, so I'll put it underneath that, but above Written in Red. I'm still a little bit on the fence about it. I would love to hear if anybody else other than Kaz has read it, because I don't think I've ever seen anybody else talk about it. So then, the next book that I'm going to be picking up is The Ninth Reign by Jen Williams. This one I have seen mixed things about, mainly because Elliot Brooks is the one I've seen rave about it, and she has convinced a lot of other people to read it, and some of those people haven't liked it as much. And there was something that she said about it that made me willing to give it a go. I don't remember what that is though, so I will read the first chapter and we will see what this is about, because I honestly don't really remember it all. Okay, so hopefully it is not about to start pouring with rain, because I don't know what that will do to the audio here. But anyway, I read the first, actually I think I read the prologue and the first chapter, and then I was tempted to read the next chapter because I still didn't really feel like I knew what was going on in the Ninth Reign. And I'm really conflicted about it because the world seems really interesting. We start with these like non-human creatures. Are they like the Fae or some kind of vampires or some other superhuman creatures? I don't know. But they had this tree god that is now dead, and that has stopped them from being immortal and basically taken away their powers. And we're following this brother and sister of this race as they kind of deal with that. And the brother seems like some kind of like troublemaker, alcoholic, drug taker, like that kind of guy, and he's just wanting to go out and have some adventures, and the sister is maybe still trying to work out what they could do to solve their problems. I don't really know. It was so slow that I have my doubts as to whether it's ever going to get going. And I do know that Elliot tends to be more of like a character-based reader than me, and so maybe it's really going to focus on those character journeys, or like the internal journeys or the internal experiences of the characters. Oh, actually, I've remembered. There was another character introduced. This woman named Vintage. This woman named Vintage, and she's like some crotchety grandma. Well, I want to say grandma type lady, but I think she's actually about my age, and I am not a grandma type lady. But everyone's kind of just assuming she's old and eccentric and not really very useful anymore. And then maybe, again, as a consequence of this tree god having died, the humans are being threatened as well. I don't really know. It wasn't winning me over. And I've just realized I don't know where I'm prioritizing this. I didn't do any pre-thinking about it, and I've got too many stacks of books around me. I think because the world is interesting, I would put it above Written in Red and maybe above Spinner. I definitely prefer having a physical stack to remember my priorities. Let me just get up and go and look at the thing. Oh, actually, I can look on my iPad. Technology. Except for some reason it's not syncing, which is not helpful. You know what? I think maybe I'm just going to put it ahead of Spinner, but not any higher. I think that's what we're going to go with. So then, the next book that I'm going to pick up the first chapter of to try is going to be The Crown Conspiracy by Michael J. Sullivan. So this is part of some big sprawling series, and this is the first book in the Ryria Revelations, which from what I could find out online seems to be the right place to start with the series. I might be wrong, but that's where we're going to start with. I don't really know much about it. I think the Revelations series is like two people, a mercenary and a thief maybe, going on adventures. I don't really know. Big sprawling fantasy series. I know Jashana really raves about it, and actually she's just announced that next year she's going to do a read along, so this would be a good time to pick it up maybe. So let's try the first chapter and see what I think about it. Okay, so please excuse the current state of my bookshelves and possibly the current state of my lighting, who knows. But I have read the first chapter of, it's called The Crown's Conspiracy, but I found the best way to get my hands on it was through this bind-up of the first book and the second book called Theft of Swords. So I have to say, the first chapter was actually really, really long. And it was kind of made up of two parts. The first part was these guys, Royce and Hadrian, and there's these people attempting to rob them, but it's obvious that they are perhaps thieves themselves or obvious badasses. I really liked their dynamics and kind of the humor and the way they were talking. It reminded me a lot of The Lies of Locke Lamora and like Locke and John. So I quite enjoyed that bit. But then the second half of the first chapter was more about this I've forgotten his title, some kind of lord guy who isn't quite as powerful as he'd like to be, trying to like blackmail this other guy into letting him marry his daughter, and it's all this big long drawn out thing really just to get into this theft, which I guess is gonna have some kind of connection to Royce and Hadrian, but I don't really know what that connection is, and that whole part was a bit tedious to get through. So you know, the first half was a lot of fun and then the second half not so much. So where do I put this? As well though, I did listen to the audiobook, and again, the samples are way too short for me to really feel like I'm getting a feel for it. I don't know that the audiobooks are my favorite. However, these books are pretty long and it's a really long series. So I think maybe, since I need audiobooks to read, I could manage to listen to this via audiobook. So I'm thinking that might be the better way to get through it. And I'm also thinking about prioritizing this in this stack, like just under the Final Strife, and in kind of the bigger priority, probably underneath the Book That Wouldn't Burn. I'm definitely being influenced by the fact that Jashana's going to be doing a read along that I would like to participate in, and the fact that I could read the audiobook, but I think that's where we're going to put it in priority anyway. So the next thing I'm going to pick up is Heirs of Power by Kay Macleod. So Kay Macleod is actually Kaz from Cats with Camera. Cats with Camera? Yes, Cats with Camera's sister. And this was a self-published series, I think. So I'm not sure if it's going to be exactly to my taste. I think it's a new adult story, kind of a chosen one type trope where she has to gather a bunch of people together to overcome some kind of bad guy. I don't know, but I'll read the first chapter and we will see what I think. Okay, so I have managed to read the first chapter of Heirs of Power. The problem that I have with this one is that in the first, I think there was a prologue and then I read the first chapter, and I still didn't really get enough information to really understand what was going on, or even there wasn't enough information to like hook me in with a cool concept. I did kind of like the main character, but I kind of felt like the first chapter was a little bit like the beginning of a lot of computer games, like RPGs, ones that I really like Zelda, or I'm specifically thinking of Guardian's Crusade, where the very first part of the game is like, go to the next town and find some information. And it was kind of similar to that, where there's a bit of a thing happens and then this young woman has to go off to the next town or somewhere to ask the princess for information. And I kind of glanced through the next chapter as well, and I still didn't feel like I was going to get the information that told me what was going on. And I expect a lot of the book will be this main character just trying to figure out what's going on. And I did see some reviews saying that they felt like the beginning was a lot of exposition and then it got better. And I kind of felt the same, like there's a lot going on, but still I didn't understand it. And part of me just wants to like give it the benefit of the doubt, and like a lot of those computer games that it's reminding me of are computer games that I really like and I specifically like for the story. But actually maybe I kind of wish I could play this as a computer game. That could be cool, because I think my understanding is that this young woman has to go and get these different people together to fight some kind of bad guys. Doesn't that sound like it could be a cool game where you're like collecting all these different characters and maybe they have different abilities. I don't know, I'm making stuff up now. However, I do kind of get the feel that I am not the target market for this, with it being like new adult type styles. So I think on balance, I do have my stack here. I think I'm probably still a little bit more interested in Written in Red, just because that had humans being eaten, and it's one I've heard a lot more people talk about, so there's that FOMO element. Then I'm trying to remember, in my bigger priority, under Written in Red, I had The Bonesmith, and it's been a while since I read the first chapter of that, but that still had some kind of necromancy element in it, which I was quite interested in. So I think I'm going to put Heirs of Power under that, but still above Seven Devils, I think it's called. It definitely has potential, just maybe not for me. Anyway, we are now up to trying the first chapter of the last book that I'm going to do in this video, which is A Long Way Home to a Small Angry Planet. Have I gotten that name right? Maybe not. Anyway, this is by Becky Chambers, and I don't actually have a specific booktuber that recommended this because it was massive on BookTube when it first came out and everyone was talking about it. It's a series about these people on a spaceship that basically creates wormholes from one place to another. So I think you basically just have this crew in the middle of nowhere. I kind of have heard there's not much of a plot and it's more of a character-based story, but I did really love A Psalm for the Wild Built and the other book in the Monk and Robot series by Becky Chambers, and that also doesn't really have a plot, so I still think maybe I'll like this. Anyway, I'm going to try the first chapter and we will see. Okay, so this is going to be an unpopular opinion, but I tried the first chapter of The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet. I was getting that title wrong. I read the first 2 chapters, I think, actually. So the first chapter, we just got a brief bit of this girl's experience as she's like in some kind of hibernation sleep while she's sent to this spaceship, and it's clear that she's like stolen somebody's identity and she's not really who she's going to be pretending to be. And then we also get a chapter of the captain of the ship that she's going to, and there's this other asshole guy who's kind of like complaining about the fact that she's coming, even though her fake identity doesn't really even have the experience for the job, or like the asshole doesn't think so. So the thing is, I didn't really like it, and maybe it gets better. It was only the first chapter, and like the audio book sample was nothing. I didn't even get to the bit where there were 2 people having a conversation, so then I feel like I didn't really get a good feel for whether the audiobook would be good, but I think it could be okay. But I guess it's just in that first chapter or 2, it didn't really give me a good feel for, like, I didn't really feel attached to the characters. I didn't get a good feel for what themes we're going to be getting into. I didn't get any cool concepts, like they are creating wormholes, so like punching through empty space and spending a lot of time in the middle of nowhere. And there was a few little brief moments of like really lovely poetic writing, but like so brief, it didn't really like draw me in with that. I don't know. I didn't love it. So if we're looking at priorities, I think where I'm going to put this is under Ninth Reign and above Spinner, just because I probably felt like, you know, in some ways it felt similar to Spinner in that it's possibly felt a little bit too young for me, but more my age than Spinner did. But I would say, even though I didn't love Ninth Reign, I felt that was a little bit slow as well. I still felt like Ninth Reign gave me more like of an interesting world. So that's the priority order we're going to go with. So as it turns out, the priority that we've come up with for this video, these are the books I got physically, and other than Written in Red, these 4 the top priority, and the outside is now the book or the series that I am the most excited about starting, and I just, every time I think about this book, I want to read that little snippet at the beginning again because it's just so great. So I have definitely found some books that I am excited to get to, and a few as well that I think could be good on audiobook. So even though some of these weren't everything that I was hoping, I've definitely found a lot to be excited about as well. And even when I try books and I don't like them, that's actually good, right? Because it's better than me picking up the series ahead of ones that I would have loved and then having to spend, or feeling like I have to spend a lot of time on the series even if it's not actually everything I wanted. And hopefully the series down the bottom of my list will find other readers that are more suited to them. Maybe it's you. Anyway, let me know if you have read any of these series that I have tried in this video. I would love to know what you thought about them and whether you think I will like them after all. Do subscribe if you'd like to see more of my bookish videos. I will be doing another one of these triad chapters in another month or so, depending how long it takes me to get my hands on the books and just get through everything. But otherwise, thank you so much for watching. I hope that you are doing well, and I will see you next time.